The magnetic cuffs were built for berserkers. But on her, they looked like oversized jewelry. Mara Vance sat in the center of the intake circle, her feet dangling a few inches off the deck plating. Around her, the air in the Zenith Apex detention block tasted of ozone and the scorched, metallic scent of high-grade floor scrubbers. My secondary mandibles clicked in rhythm with the blinking read light on the heart rate monitor. It read a steady, mocking 72 beats per minute. The Krell thought they were the apex. What follows is a warning for every giant in the galaxy. For hours earlier, the Academy had been a place of predictable, aristocratic order. The Zenith Apex was designed for the scions of the Krell Dominion and the crystalline valor and elite. A sprawling fortress of violet chit-in architecture and gravity-defying spires. Humans were the newcomers. The soft tissue curiosity tolerated only because their trade routes were too lucrative to ignore. Mara Vance was just another biology student, a small shadow moving through the halls of giants. Warden JYX. The paperwork is a mess. Guard VREL said, his scales shimmering with a nervous, translucent green. He handed me a data pad with 3 of my 4 hands. The Krell Embassy has already filed for summary execution. They're calling it an unprovoked massacre. I looked from the pad to the prisoner. Mara was whistling. It was a jaunty, low-tempo tune from a planet that apparently didn't know the meaning of a death sentence. She wasn't looking at the guards or the charging magnetic gates. Instead, she was staring at the reflection of her own ponytail in the security glass, adjusting a loose strand of hair with a focused, unlighted precision. Did you kill them? Yes. My voice, synthesized through the Quellian translator, sounded flatter than I intended. Mara stopped whistling. Kill them? No, I'm a xenobiology major. Warden, I know exactly how much chitin needs to stay intact for a Krellian to keep breathing. The door to the interrogation suite hissed open, admitting Investigator Crix. The Valor-An was a jagged pillar of sentient crystal, his internal light pulsing with an aggressive, jagged read. He didn't sit. He simply projected a sonic hum that made my antennae twitch in pain. Mara didn't flinch. She actually leaned forward, as if interested in the frequency. You hospitalized 3 scions of the Krell High Command. Crix vibrated. Cadet VOR Tesh has a triple-hinged jaw. Or rather, he hit one. It is currently being held together by surgical wire and hope. He shouldn't have led with his chin. Mara said. Her voice was terrifyingly calm. It's a structural pivot point. Incredibly fragile if you apply force at a 45-degree angle. I cleared my throat. Or the Quellian equivalent of it. The Krell are triple G worlders. Nor. Their bone density is 4 times yours. They're armored and deflect kinetic rounds. You weigh 60 kilograms and we're wearing a lab coat. Crick slammed a crystalline fist onto the table. Enough of this biological dilution. We have the footage from training Atrium 12. We haven't watched it yet. We waited for the embassy witnesses to arrive so they can see the exact moment you initiated this unprovoked assault. Actually, Mara interrupted. Can I get a CIF infusion first? I skipped my nap for this, and am starting to get a headache. The sheer audacity of the request caused Crix's internal light to flicker into a confused orange. I signaled VREL to fetch the stimulant. It was a bureaucratic stall, but I needed a moment to process the readout on the heart rate monitor. It hadn't moved, even as the Krell-Ian High Kind filed into the observation gallery behind the one-way glass. Mara Vance's pulse remained arrhythmic. Mechanical 72. She wasn't brave. She was regulated. VREL returned with a ceramic cylinder, the steam rising from the dark. Bitter liquid was the only thing in the room that seemed to have any heat. Mara took a sip, winced at the bitterness, and then nodded at the wall. Play the tape, she said. The wall dissolved into a high-definition projection of the training dome. The timestamp showed 6:42 p. The dome was empty except for Mara, who was sitting on a bench reading a digital scroll. Then, 3 shadows entered. The Orcs and other Krellians, their violet armor gleaming under the artificial suns. They didn't look like students. They looked like tanks. The Krellians surrounded her. There was no audio. But the Orcs' triple-hinged jaw was moving rapidly. He was laughing. He reached out an obsidian claw to grab Mara's shoulder, his massive frame looming over her like a mountain of chitin. The room went silent. I felt my antennae stiffen. The footage didn't show a fight. It showed a correction. In the first 3 seconds, Mara didn't retreat. She stepped into the Krellian's reach. Her hand, small and pale against his violet shell, didn't punch. It moved with a terrifying, clinical grace. She struck the underside of Vor's jaw, the precise structural pivot point she had mentioned. The heavy bone didn't just break. It folded. Stop, lay back. Crix commanded. Draywind. Enhance the limb tracking. We watched it at quarter speed. This was the biological geometry she had spoken of. Mara wasn't using strength. She was using the Krellian's own mass against them. When the second attacker lunged, she didn't block. She placed her fingers against the soft joint of his elbow and redirected his 130-kilogram momentum into the reinforced wall. The sound of chitin shattering was audible even through the muted recording. She moved like a hurricane that had studied anatomy. There was no wasted motion, no hesitation. Every strike landed on a nerve cluster or a structural weakness. At the 19-second mark, the footage froze. Mara was Maidre, having launched herself off the chest of the second Krellian. Her face was bored. She was already looking past her current target, her eyes fixed on the third attacker's knees before her feet had even left the ground. By 21 seconds, it was over. 3 aristocratic warriors were on the floor, twitching in a geometric pattern of failure. Mara didn't look back. She walked to the comms panel, requested medical aid for the men she had just ruined, and went back to her bench to finish her scroll. Behind the glass, the Krellian High Command wasn't shouting anymore. They were backing away from the window. A high-priority alert pinged on my internal comms. My secondary mandibles clicked in a frantic burst. A relentless class carrier had just dropped out of warp in the Zenith Apex sector. It wasn't Krell. It was a human fleet vessel. The Vengeance. Investigator. I whispered. We have a problem. A diplomatic one. Crix was staring at the screen, his crystalline body dimming. Who is she? Her father is Admiral Silas Vance, I said, reading the secondary file that had just bypassed my security encryption. And according to this, she wasn't even the top of her combat class on Earth. She was the one they hired to teach the instructors how to survive. The heavy atmosphere indoors at the end of the hall groaned. It wasn't the sound of an opening. It was the sound of a station structure vibrating under the proximity of a massive kinetic presence. The Admiral wasn't sending a lawyer. He was sending a message. I looked at Mara. She had finished her CIF infusion and was now looking at the ceramic cylinder with a faint scowl. She looked up at me, her expression shifting from boredom to a mild, scholarly annoyance. The coffee's lukewarm. Warden, she said, and the cuffs are starting to chafe. Are we done with the theater? I signaled the release code. The magnetic cuffs fell to the floor with a heavy, final thud. Ariel scrambled to open the cell door. His scales are terrified, translucent white. The Krellian embassy officials had already vanished, likely headed for the nearest escape pods or a very deep bunker. The charges are scrubbed, I said, my voice sounding thin even to my own ears. The Academy is revising its bylaws regarding proportional response. Specifically, we're adding a footnote about provoking humans. Mara stood up and stretched. She looked perfectly normal. She looked like a girl who enjoyed biology and missed her naps. She walked toward the door, then paused, looking back at the heart rate monitor that was still tethered to the chair. It finally spiked, jumping from 72 to 78, but only because she had started walking. We didn't evolve to be the fastest things in the woods. Warden, she said softly. We evolved to be the last thing standing when the fast things tire. Don't corner the persistent. We don't just survive. We solve you. I watched her walk down the long, chitinous hallway of the Zenith Apex. She looked so small against the towering arches, a 60-kilogram anomaly in a world of armored giants. But as the shadow of the Vengeance passed over the station, darkening the violet sky, I realized that mass was a lie. I picked up the data pad to begin the long process of filing the incident report. My hands were shaking, a physical imperfection I hadn't experienced in years. I checked the notes one last time, looking for a detail I had missed. There, at the bottom of her academic transcript, was a single elective she had taken 3 times: advanced anatomical deconstruction. Outside the viewport, the stars were obscured by the hull of a ship that could crack a planet. The silence in the detention block was absolute, broken only by the hum of the scrubbers trying to erase the scent of the Krell in defeat. I reached for my own cup of stimulant, but my hand stopped. The ceramic cylinder Mara had used sat on the table. It was empty. A ring of dark, bitter residue staining the bottom of the white clay. Blueprint complete. Ready for write the story command.